Have you ever stopped to think why, after a betrayal, the one who ends up carrying the blame is the one who was betrayed? It seems crazy, but this is what happens every day. Betrayal, guilt, shame, questioning. And the victim, who should be being welcomed, finds herself wondering what she did wrong. If she wasn't affectionate enough, if she gained weight, if she talked too much, if she demanded too much, if she loved too much, if she stopped being the ideal woman. This is the trap. When the pain of infidelity mixes with the idea that it was your fault, and worse, this narrative doesn't start on its own. It's fed by him. Yes, he, the cheater, who right after the slip-up, the mistake, comes up with that ready-made speech. You've been so distant. We've been bad for a while. You never have time for me. And instead of getting angry, you start looking inside yourself for the justifications for what he did. You start to believe that if you had acted differently, maybe he wouldn't have cheated. But answer me honestly, at what point was it agreed that if you weren't perfect 100% of the time, he would be free to break the agreement? When did his mistake become your responsibility? Blaming yourself for the betrayal you suffered is, without a doubt, one of the cruelest forms of self-violence, because you are already hurt, already broken, and instead of receiving love, you receive judgment, including from yourself. And let's be honest, no woman should have to carry this pain alone. Betrayal, even if it comes disguised as a crisis, a bad phase, a mistake, is always a conscious choice. No one stumbles and falls into another person. There is intention. There is decision. And if you find yourself feeling guilty, thinking that your attitude provoked that, be careful. That is a terrible idea. This is how a cycle of self-sabotage begins. You think you need to improve so you don't get cheated. On again, that you need to shape up, make yourself smaller, be more understanding, sexier, more patient, all to hold on to someone who has already proven that they don't have the emotional maturity to sustain a real relationship. But tell me one thing. How long will you accept taking the blame for a mistake that wasn't yours? How long will you punish yourself for someone else's selfishness? Think about it. And before you take the blame again, hold on a little. Listen until the end. Because what you're about to hear now could change the way you see all of this. Are you ready? Do you know what happens when you blame yourself for his betrayal? You ease his conscience. And worse, you give him a certificate of innocence. He made a mistake, but you take responsibility. He lied, but you wonder if you demanded too much. He sneaked out, deleted messages, planned meetings, and you think that maybe you left the relationship cold. This is how you become a defendant in a crime you never committed. This idea that a woman needs to keep a man safe, with her perfect body, her good mood, her constant desire, her tidy home, is a trap that is as old as it is unfair. It is the old discourse that puts his pleasure and well-being above your dignity. As if he has the right to make mistakes when he feels neglected, but you can never fail as a partner. And then, when he cheats, you look for the reasons within yourself. But I'll tell you a hard truth. He didn't cheat on you because of your fault. He cheated because of his excess. Excess of ego, immaturity, cowardice. Because dealing with problems, talking, facing them head-on, requires courage. And cheating is the easy way out for those who don't know how or don't want to mature. Have you ever noticed how cheating is always covered in excuses when the man is the perpetrator? It was just a one-time thing. It was impulsive. It didn't mean anything. I was confused. But if it were you? Oh, then the judgment would come mercilessly. Because the woman who cheats is seen as a destroyer. But the man who cheats? He made a mistake, but he deserves a second chance. This unequal burden is cruel. And accepting the blame reinforces this logic. You keep quiet to keep the peace. You blame yourself to save the relationship. But who saves you? How many nights have you cried in silence without telling anyone what you were feeling? How many times have you looked in the mirror thinking that you weren't enough, that you deserved to go through this, that other women can handle worse things? Don't romanticize suffering, no. If he chose to cheat, it was because he prioritized his desires over respect for you. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever found yourself trying to understand what you did wrong, even though you know that it was him who messed up? Comment here. Let it out. Your story could open the eyes of another woman who is listening to this video right now. You know what else is upsetting? Most of the time, he doesn't even really regret it. He just doesn't want to lose the comfort he has with you. Because the lover is new, but you are solid. And it's easier to manipulate your guilt than to face the consequences of what he did. So, I tell you, stop looking for blame in yourself. Because the responsibility is his. The betrayal is his. The shame should be his. You don't deserve to carry this pain as if it were punishment for being imperfect. And if you still have doubts, listen to the final part. Because what happens when you stop blaming yourself changes everything. When you stop blaming yourself for his betrayal, something powerful happens. You start to see yourself more clearly. You realize that you spent so much time trying to understand his mistake as if it were your own, that you forgot to remember who you are. And you are not the woman who deserved to be betrayed. You are the woman who trusted, who tried, who held it together for a time he couldn't have endured. You were strong, not naive. Cheating doesn't say anything about you. It says everything about him, about his character, his lack of empathy, his cowardice. When you stop blaming yourself, you take off the lens of pain and put on the lens of reality. He wasn't an accident. He was a choice. And it wasn't yours. And do you know what happens when you understand this? You stop chasing explanations that will never come. You stop begging for love from someone who only offered you crumbs. You stop living for what you could have done differently and start living for what you can still achieve. Because life doesn't end with betrayal. It starts over again. You start over stronger, with more self-love, with a greater sense of justice, with less tolerance for those who just want to use your heart as an emotional cushion. And no, it's not easy. There are days when guilt still tries to knock on the door. The difference is that now you know you don't have to open it. You've learned to identify the manipulation, the toxic cycle, the burden that isn't yours. You're not responsible for what he did, but you are responsible for not accepting that in your life anymore. And look, don't think this is about pride. This is about dignity. It's about you understanding that forgiving is not the same as giving up beyond this, that loving someone doesn't mean abandoning yourself. That moving on sometimes is the greatest act of love you can have for yourself. There are women who blame themselves for years, who forgive again and again and again, hoping that he will change. But he only changes his strategy, because as long as you are blaming yourself, he will be comfortable. While you diminish yourself, he grows on top of your silence. But the day you decide to lift your head, oh, that day changes everything. It changes the way you look in the mirror. It changes the way you relate to others. It changes what you accept. You stop apologizing for being betrayed and start demanding respect for having survived. If this message made sense to you, if it touched your heart in some way, subscribe to the channel. We talk about pain, but we also talk about healing, about strength, about starting over. And you deserve to be surrounded by content that reminds you of your worth. And always remember, it's not your fault. It never was.